Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast live today. We got a freaking great show planned ahead, wide receiver strategy talk, as well as a sleeper mock draft, multitasking here on this glorious Thursday afternoon. I'm Ian Hartitz, joined by PFF's finest, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland, as well as resident ranking expert Nathan Jahnke. Dwain, how are you?
I'm doing excellent, Ian. Just got through writing a piece, which is always fun, and we're one day closer to the weekend and more fantasy drafts. Like, what could there not be to love? Like, Ian, like this is the time of the year we're waiting for.
Look, I personally am ready for week one to start, Dwayne. I've gotten my takes off. I no longer have the energy or even the appeal of just barking about random nonsense throughout the week when no football is being played. I had about 7 months of it, and I was happy to do so the entire time. But at this point, I feel like I've reached my breaking point. I'm just ready to draft. I'm ready for week one to be here, and it is what it is. But we got some good things to talk about today. Nate, how are you, man?
Doing well in the process of going through basically all of the articles I've written over the past 2 months and making sure it's all up to date with all the recent information. So if you're drafting this weekend, you'll be ready to go. But also excited we get college football a lot tonight.
Got them Buckeyes playing those freaking Catholics over in Notre Dame this weekend. I hope everyone's rooting for the right team in that matchup. Hasn't beaten the Buckeyes in over 100 years. I think we're going to keep that tally going, but I don't know. I'm just an ignorant Ohio State fan these days. Again, YouTubers, you can check out the sleeper mock draft we got going on here. I'm picking out the 101 spot, but don't want to exactly just bring you guys through every single pick of this. You can find tons of drafts that Dwayne and myself particularly have recorded throughout the summer on PFF's YouTube page, but we got a fun little 12-team PPR start, me going out of the 101 here. So with all that said, guys, we talked about quarterbacks and running backs yesterday. Here now to give kind of our final thoughts on the wide receiver position. So Dwayne, you've done a lot of work again all summer long talking about how every single draft is its own dynamic organism. I need to write it down. I messed up the actual tagline. Yeah, here we go.
Unique, living, dynamic organism, I believe. I don't even know. Those words are in there though, for sure. Like those words are in there.
Something
like, honestly, like you've
that.
taken it to the point where I don't even need to know it anymore. Like you've always got it. And that's the thing that I usually get the most common to anything I tweet. Like that is somewhere in the responses, like just that line. So.
Wow. Either way, it's true. And we can start a draft, wide receiver times 3. I didn't fall into the trap again there. Or running back times 3. A lot of different options that we have on the table. With that said, even just where we're picking in the terms of early in the first round, middle first round, late the first round, Dwayne, how do you find yourself, like how often I should say, do you find yourself attacking wide receivers more heavily in the early rounds, depending on what draft position you end up getting?
Yeah, so if I'm picking in the later part of the first round, almost always, I'm taking one. Stefan Diggs, right, is usually there. We love Devontae Adams. Early part of round 2, we love CeeDee Lamb. Those are all like centerpiece components, like to drafting from the late position, especially in PPR, right? Got to know your scoring format. Half PPR as well. Standard leagues, you're obviously going to shift more over to the running backs because we just have far higher percentage of the top 12, top 24, top 50, scorers are going to end up being running backs in that format. But overall, yeah, early, I don't mind going receiver. If I'm picking from middle position, like my dream, Ian, is for Justin Jefferson, to be sitting there at pick 6. And that happens right now. If you look over at Fantasy Pros, you look at the most recent ADP, Justin Jefferson's coming off the board at round 1, pick 6. As far as, just thinking about the rest of your draft, I think once you get, into rounds 4, 5, and 6, like there are just so many dead zone running backs that we went through that yesterday. If folks want to go back and listen to the running back episode, you can hear more about some of the backs that we're avoiding, what we're doing in those rounds. There are a couple guys you can like there, but there's just a ton of receivers that go in that range. And if you're drafting over on ESPN, like it is absolute larceny, like where these guys are listed in the daggum queue and the ADP. You can get Allen Robinson in round 6 over there, Michael Thomas in round 7, Rashad Bateman in round 8, Elijah Moore in round 8. It's just insane, the players that you can get over on ESPN. Yahoo has some pretty good value as well. I know those are the 2 most utilized sites, but just make sure you go check out, like, what does the ADP look like for the site that you're drafting on. That's where this whole unique living organism thing comes from. And like Nathan said yesterday, knowing your league mates, just knowing how they're going to go, how they're going to draft, getting a feel for it. But love really pounding those receivers in the middle rounds. Obviously, we'll take a slight pause to get an elite upside dual threat quarterback, in round 6, round 7.
Plenty of value over at sleeper as well in the mock draft we got going on. Mike Williams fell to the first pick of the 5th round. Rashad Bateman at the 6-12 spot. Gabriel Davis first pick of the 7th round. I'm not used to seeing these guys fall this far, Dwayne, but again, it's September 1st. I don't know how much longer that we can exactly look at the sharper best ball ADP and be like, this is going to happen at this point in the year. I think exactly what you said. Just take the freaking values, because there's absolutely awesome wide receivers littered across the early and middle rounds, pretty much regardless of the early draft position. Nathan, how willing have you been, I guess, to change your strategy in terms of how many, or what wide receivers you're trying to target early on in drafts based on where exactly you're picking from?
Early in the drafts in particular, I've been pretty fine getting either Jefferson or Kupp, specifically because once you loop around to the end of the 2nd round and start of the 3rd round, there's still a couple of those running backs that we expect to be huge volume plays that are still available there. So I'm perfectly fine going wide receiver with Kupp or Jefferson, then running back. And then similar to what Dwayne said at the end of the 1st round, very happy to get someone like Diggs or Adams at the end of the 1st round and then get a running back right after that. So in middle of the 1st round, it's basically always a running back unless a wide receiver falls.
Dwayne,
there's so many wide receivers that I like throughout the draft. Top 50, top 60 guys. I can go through each team and find 2 or 3 guys to get at least somewhat excited about. So I'm perfectly fine waiting in almost every kind of case, though.
Dwayne, I saw you tweeting earlier just about Stefan Diggs, and he's a consensus top 5 receiver. We all understand how great he is and what his upside is. But how many running backs actually, Dwayne, would you kind of consider taking ahead of Diggs in the 1st round? Obviously, Taylor and McCaffrey, but would you actually slide Diggs up into that Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase top tier and take him ahead of guys like Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry?
I think it's fine if you want to do it. The one thing you have to remember is just the elite upside that you get as far as the top end performances from running backs, right? We go back to 2011, 67% of the top 3 performers in PPR formats have been running backs. So it's just a matter of what that absolute ceiling is. Yes, sometimes you can get a Cooper Kupp like season where you just get an absolute smash, which is honestly, you could argue Cooper Kupp had a quarterback season, not even a running back season. He outscored Josh Allen last year. So in a PPR format. So I am willing to do it, especially if you don't like to take on the risk, right, of the running backs. And I think Stefan Diggs is kind of where that stops, though, right? He would be the last one, Ian, I would really be willing to do it on. Some of the other guys, even like Davante Adams, he's in the same tier. CeeDee Lamb's in the same tier, a little bit lower than Stefan Diggs for me, but he would be the one. And the reason why is we know it's a pass-heavy offense. They pass more than the league average, whether they're winning, trailing, tied, sitting on their grandma's couch. It doesn't matter. It's a bye week, and the Bills pass more than the Seattle Seahawks do. So when I look at that, you get Josh, Allen, an elite quarterback. And then, we all like Gabe Davis, but we don't know if he's going to be more than an 18, 19% target share player. And folks, Gabe Davis truthers, calm down. He could pay off. He can pay off his ADP just as that, because the Bills, again, pass the ball so much. Dawson Knox was a good tight end last year. He didn't really demand targets in any sort of high rate, right? He hasn't shown us anything that suggests he's an elite tight end at this point. And then after that, we all love Isaiah McKenzie, but he's been around a while. Is he all of a sudden going to be a 30% target share guy? So the door is wide open. Typically when we see these 28, 30% target share seasons, like what we've seen with Davante Adams in the past, it's with a cast of surrounding characters that, they're nice, but they're not great options. And so with Diggs, you just get it all. We've seen his talent. We've seen him check the boxes from a targets per route run, target share standpoint, and now he plays in this elite offense. I wouldn't be surprised if he got a 30% target share and he ends up with 200 targets, because we rarely get to see someone in this much of a hyper passing offense get that kind of target share, but it really could happen for Stefan Diggs this year. And I know we kind of throw this thing around. Oh, they wide receiver one's in their range of outcomes. It's really in the range of outcomes for Stefan Diggs.
And when you look at him versus the other wide receivers in that 1st round, I just think the continuity that he has over pretty much everyone other than the 3 guys going ahead of him and CeeDee Lamb, to me, that's a tiebreaker between Stefan Diggs and Tyreek Hill and Davante Adams, because maybe straight up talent. If I was starting a team tomorrow, I'll give it to you. Davante Adams and Tyreek, I think, are slightly better than Stefan Diggs, but both these guys, I think we can agree, all three of them, pretty freaking amazing wide receivers. Let's take the guy that has the potential to get, 50 more targets than the other two. So good notes there.
And again, that is PPR, half PPR. If you flip over to standard, right, Diggs, I have more like as my, number 12 player.
I am taking Chase and Diggs at the turn of the latest mock draft I have going on. Absolutely love when you get some of those top 5 receivers falling to you deep into the first round. Dwayne, we talked. We've given the man plenty of shout outs here. Drew Davenport, go follow him on Twitter if you want some auction advice. Give us your Drew Davenport inspired auction breakdown at wide receiver. Dwayne, some general notes that you've mentioned in other podcasts, really not looking to spend more than 20% of your budget on any single player, period. Are you still keeping that mindset at wide receiver for auction drafts?
Yeah, for sure. And remember, the 20% is in a league where you've got multiple flex spots, right? So you've got 2 running backs, you've got to start 3 receivers, 1 tight end, but you have 2 or 3 flex players. If you're in a league, which a lot of you folks are, where it's 2 running backs, say 2 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 flex, then you can spend, say, 25%, on your top players. So just make sure you kind of think through it. The more starters that you have to have in your lineup, the less likely you should be willing to spend a huge amount on the top end player, because then the way you win that sort of league is you want to turn around and fill all those 3 flex spots with other really good players when everybody else's money is gone. But if you're in a situation where, hey, it's pretty much all these starters, we don't have as many, then you can spend a little bit more on the other guys. But yeah, it's everything else is really the same, Ian. There's nothing else to say. Again, I think of it the easiest way, if you've never done an auction, and Nathan, you can jump in here, but the easiest way I think about it, let's say most of you have been doing snake drafts, for multiple years now. Just think of it that way. You kind of know what ADP is. You've been reading about it. You know where guys kind of go. If they're around 1 player, right, and you're in a shallow bench league, 25%, right, on those top half of round 1 guys, that's where you would spend 25%. Once you get to the back end of round 1, you're starting to get in the 20% range. You're in round 2, you're kind of in that 20% range. So players that normally go in those areas, that's an easy way, if you haven't done auctions, to kind of think about parameters of how you should, kind of cap your dollars and what you should spend. But at receiver this year, again, depending on the site you're drafting on, those auction values are going to be worth more or less. So if you're over on ESPN, like, you might get Allen Robinson, for, 5% of your budget. You might get him for less than that because he's so far down the list. Rashad Bateman, way down the list. So a lot of the same principles apply depending on which site your league is using to help drive, the draft.
Nathan, general auction thoughts at wide receiver. If you just want to agree with everything Dwayne said, certainly fair. But if there's maybe a wide receiver that you could see yourself, breaking that 20% general rule of thumb for, who would they be? And again, general overall auction strategy thoughts.
Yeah, I think general strategy, agree with everything Dwayne said. I specifically at wide receiver, more than any other, like to have dollar amounts set in my head ahead of time, kind of wait the first couple wide receivers, see if the league I'm in is spending more or less than I would expect at wide receivers, so I can kind of fairly value from there, and then just have the price tag at each wide receiver. If it hits that price tag, go ahead and get him. If not, then wait for the next one. And there's so many ones that I'd be okay getting, but this year, just with Jefferson and Kupp, I think they're both in store for excellent seasons, so I would feel a little more comfortable spending more on them than maybe the 20%, but very much depends on the league size and all those parameters.
I had a high school teacher who would just answer basically every question with "it depends," and little did I know that my fantasy football career would end up, answering a lot of questions myself with that same answer. But hey, sometimes it just depends, guys. Good strategy talk. Dwayne, who's your favorite sleeper with an ADP outside the top 100? And we're using Fantasy Pros consensus ADP. If you're balking at us, how the hell is that guy available outside the top 100? Good. Take him in that case. That's a good sign that you should be. That's a value. That's what we call a value or a sleeper, everyone. Don't be yelling at us. Be yelling at the rest of you out there that aren't drafting him early enough. Okay. So with that off my chest, Dwayne, favorite sleeper outside the top 100.
Yeah, so outside the top, and I've softened a little bit like on this one, but I'm just not going to take it too far. But it is Kadarius Toney. I mean, you can still get him at pick 108. He's wide receiver 46 coming off the board in PPR formats. And so the thing with Kadarius Toney that makes it so tough, Ian, to pass him is like when we look at the analytical side of it, like he checks every box. Like, so if you're an analytics pro, quote unquote, you love Kadarius Toney because you're like, holy crap, 26% targets per route run. Look at his yards per route run. Look at his PFF receiving grade as a rookie. All those things, when you line them up, they look really good compared to like guys that have gone on to just completely smash fantasy seasons. Now, it was on a limited sample size. Why? Because Kadarius Toney can't ever stay on the freaking field, right? And so that's a challenge. But if you're a film bro, you love Kadarius Toney too, because when you go watch him, there's just something different. You're like, holy crap, like most receivers, even the NFL, can't do like what he just did. They can't completely turn around, like the best cornerbacks in the league, Marshawn Lattimore, all these guys, like just completely twisting them out of their shoes. And then once the ball's in his hands, does the same thing. He's like, it's like a video game. So he's just one of these guys. Yeah, I'm a little worried that he's not going to be able to stay healthy. He's going to end up in the coaching doghouse. But at the same time, like Kenny Galladay is in the doghouse too. Sterling Shepard's still coming back, from an injury. Wandel Robinson, we like him. He's a rookie, but he's a small guy. He's going to play the slot. Like, I don't know how good Wandel Robinson's going to be. I mean, we like him as someone we take later in drafts, but I just feel like it's going to be really hard this year in particular for them, to not have Toney on the field all the time, as long as he's healthy, even if he might be rubbing coaches the wrong way. So I just feel like the upside is so huge. He is the one guy, like when I look down past pick 100 and think, yeah, there's risk, but I know the talent's there. The film matches it. If everything works right, he could get 150 targets, and you're getting him after pick 100. And they're not just nasty targets either, right? They're being forced. They're like, oh my God, he's got the ball again. Look at what he's doing. So I'm kind of conflicted because I am worried about the injuries, but man, it just stacks up too well for Toney.
The Mike Renner induced PFF draft guide note for Kadarius Toney when it was coming out was that basically Mike said that if every single prospect had to play a game of tag, Kadarius Toney would be his pick to be the last man standing at the end. And that's what you see from him. I mean, again, and it really, I know we always look at the Cowboy game, and that was actually when Mike Glennon was under center for most of it after Daniel Jones got hurt. But we saw it the week before in the Saints game was really when he started to flash. And then even, man, he only played like 10 snaps or something against the Rams the following week, but already, was at like 339 just briefly into the game. So Kadarius Toney,
like
just be healthy,
Darren,
man. Come on.
It's like Darren Sproles or something. Like I haven't, his ability to evade tackles, like it's nuts.
It truly is. Nathan, favorite sleeper outside the top 100.
I think I'll go with Tyler Boyd.
No, you can't. That was mine.
Well, with him in the slot in Cincinnati, he's fairly consistently been a fantasy starter throughout his career. And I know they have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but they run 11 personnel almost more than any other team. So Boyd will constantly be on the field. Over the second half of last year, when both Chase and Higgins were top 10 fantasy wide receivers, Boyd was still in that top 30 range. So they can support all three wide receivers. The defenses will be focused on the outside guys. And probably the biggest thing is that there isn't that injury to either Chase or Higgins. Boyd can play in two wide receiver sets, so he would see the field even more in those situations and be catching passes throughout the year from one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So I think he probably doesn't have that top 10 upside unless there's an injury, but I think you can get him fairly late and just stick him in your fantasy lineup and still be happy with it.
People don't want to draft him. Ian and I have been in so many drafts, and we're like, Tyler Boyd's still here? Like, why haven't we taken him?
It continues to amaze me. In the draft I just did, he actually went in a decent area right after Julio Jones, ahead of guys like MVS, Russell Gage, and Rondeo Moore, among others. But not a given, Dwain. We got him like outside the top 60 in one of these drafts we were doing. And look, at Tyler Boyd, like, okay, if both Chase and Higgins stay healthy, I understand the ceiling's not going to be there, but we're talking about someone ranked outside the top 50, 60 wide receivers. He was literally the wide receiver 36 in back-to-back seasons in terms of PPR points per game. And I know we can't always look at a number 3 wide receiver, number 4 wide receiver, like we do a running back. Handcuff wide receivers, it's not nearly as smooth of a transition to running back. We know that our wide receivers need to be far more talented necessarily than a running back that just gets thrown in there and gets a bunch of volume, with all due respect to you, Dearness Johnson truthers out there. But yeah, so you guys took couple of the number 3 wide receivers I think have this quote unquote handcuff upside in the passing games, just to list some of these guys, because again, it's got to be a wide receiver 3 that we think is talented and we think is in a good enough passing game where we actually want to have the number 2, number 3 wide receiver involved in that. So I had written down Isaiah McKenzie, Tyler Boyd, good call, Nate, Joshua Palmer over there with the Chargers, KJ Hamler with the Broncos, Jalen Tolbert with the Cowboys, already seeing some of the benefits of having Michael Gallup sideline, KJ Osborne with the Vikings, Russell Gage with the Buccaneers, Rondeo Moore, undisclosed injury, doesn't match my priors, so I'm ignoring it for now, and then also maybe Sky Moore, depending on how things shake out in Kansas City. Nate, anyone you think I'm missing here? Again, this kind of wide receiver 3 handcuff type of guy that has maybe more untapped upside than people are giving them credit for?
I think that's a fairly good list. Like, my brain still goes to the Broncos with Tim Patrick, and I'm like, no, he's out for the year. But if the Broncos had an injury and Tim Patrick magically got healthy, but no, I think that's a fairly good list of the handcuff wide receivers.
I say this like every podcast at this point. I'll keep saying it. I don't care. Like, the fact that Judy and KJ Hamler's ADP hasn't changed more with the Tim Patrick news is just wild, because I think we were going to be looking at much more of a 4 wide receiver rotation with everything going on. So to lose Patrick, and I mean, don't forget, Judy did have those kind of random legal issues popping up this offseason. It didn't amount to anything, and I think he was proven fully innocent. Just saying, there was some uncertainty there. KJ Hamler, we had no idea if he'd even be ready for week 1, let alone looks like he's probably going to be the starting number 3 wide receiver. A lot of things have gone Judy and Hamler's way this offseason that I don't think have exactly been baked in. Dwain, any thoughts on that list? McKenzie, Boyd, Palmer, Hamler, Tolbert, Osborne, Gage, Rondeo Moore, Sky Moore. I mean, look, we're 7 football guys drafts deep. I mean, I'd love to see our exposure for these guys, because it seems like these are the targets that once we get to rounds, 11, 12, repeatedly we're going after.
Yeah, no, this is the list, man. And we love them all. But I think the biggest point, is what you mentioned. KJ Hamler, just hasn't come up the boards far enough. He did play, the final preseason game, which was good just to see him back there. I mean, he's basically a year removed from the ACL injury. I believe it was week 2 of the 2021 season. So just nice to know that he's going to be out there. They released Kendall Hinton. I think they did bring him back to the practice squad. But if you just look at the depth chart, all of a sudden with the Broncos, it's like, well, we really have Sutton and Judy. We've got a lot of questions about Albert O at this point. And KJ Hamler is by far, when I just think of from a pure talent perspective, he's the next man up. And, really with Sutton and Judy, we like them, but neither one of them have shown us for sure, right, that they're going to be smash prospects. So they've both put up some nice underlying data points. Sutton did have one nice year, but at the end of the day, we could look up, and even without, this being quote unquote handcuff, we could see KJ Hamler surprise us and just be the wide receiver 2 on this team by week 5 or 6 with Russ Wilson, and just the skill set fit. So I love the call on KJ Hamler. It's really hard not to honestly, it's hard to not draft him every single time we draft together, because we're looking up, we're like, round 15, KJ Hamler. Who says no? Nobody says no. You just take him. He should be around 12 to 13 pick.
Pro Football Focus new app. We got our draft guide on there. You can actually see all of our pick by pick, round by round strategy with our rankings for every single player out there. We actually have Gabriel Davis all ranked within 2 overall spots. I believe, I'm not sure who's actually the highest, but it's 51, 50, 52, and 53rd overall. Freaking Kevin Cole's going to be a downer here, but we got the 3 Gabe Davis truthers all in the same StreamYard at this point in time. Nathan, what gives you confidence in, I guess, jumping onto the Gabriel Davis hype train? Because I'm not so sure there's been, a wide receiver just more discussed on a day-to-day basis than him throughout the offseason.
I think it's because we have confidence in his role, and while it's been on a smaller sample size, he's performed well when given the opportunity. Just the fact that the Bills had a number of wide receivers last year that they were kind of rotating some guys in and out, where this year it seems a lot more set that there are 4 guys at the top of the depth chart, and 2 of them play more so in the slot. So Gabriel Davis should see a vast majority of offensive snaps. I don't think he'll be leaving the field that often. And he's performed really well every time he's been given the opportunity. So I think the combination of talent and opportunity is there, plus the offense that he plays in is obviously a huge plus for him. So combination of all those things, I think he has a decently high floor because of the offense he's in, but the talent that we think he has can push him even higher.
talent, opportunity, great offense. Dwain, is that something that you might be interested in? I mean, what are we missing here? Why did we spend so many damn hours discussing Gabriel Davis this offseason, especially after the draft, after free agency, when we could just see that really the competition wasn't going to be there? Like, how does Gabriel Davis bust, Dwain? Because you mentioned it before. Even if he does only get this 18, 19% target share because of how damn much the Bills throw the ball, we're still looking at someone where, like, what should be his target projection over under, like 95 or something?
I've got it at 105. That's what I think his median is. That's at an 18% targets per route run and 85% route participation. Nathan nailed it. I mean, if you look at it last year, like he didn't get to that 85% participation mark, which is typically what a receiver that plays, most of the downs, that's where they're at. He didn't get to do that until very late in the season. And then even once he did that, like his actual targets per route run over that stretch went up. It was actually 21% targets per route run. I think the thing with Davis, like, I'm not quite as sold on his talent profile. Like, that's where I think the question is, right? But at the end of the day, he plays with Josh Allen. He plays in an offense that's going to throw the ball a lot. And if he doesn't take any step forward, he just stays the same Gabriel Davis we've always known, because that's what everyone argues. Oh, he can't take a step forward. Well, if he just can do what he has done, like over the last, what he did at the end of last year, he would be in a great situation, to get at least 105 targets. And they're quality. These are quality targets. Like a target from Josh Allen is worth a lot more than a target from, I don't want to say Geno Smith because we've been trying to be a little nicer to him.
Yeah, come on.
Baker Mayfield. I know you're always okay with Baker Mayfield, but like with Josh Allen, like, look, man, you're just playing with a great offense. I do agree that overall, like his talent profile is less than a coin flip. Like if we want to use his PFF receiving grades over his first 2 years, yards per route run, targets per route run, his draft capital is round 4. His comparisons are Darius Slayton, James Washington, Devin Funchess, Torrey Smith, Ruben Randall, and Jermaine Kearse. That doesn't do a lot for you, right? So that doesn't mean, though, that he just can't hit. Where I'm out on Gabe Davis is, like, you just get in some drafts where you just can't get him, man. Like, he goes in round – I saw him go in round 3 last weekend. See him go really early in round 4 in a lot of these drafts. I'm much more comfortable with Gabe Davis when he slides into round 5. When I'm sitting there at round 4, and I could take Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's just so many other guys that I'm like, I feel much more conviction around, because talent profile still is the number one thing for me with receivers. Like you mentioned a minute ago, Ian, it's much more important for the receivers than it is for the running backs. Again, no disrespect to you folks out there, on Dearness Johnson. We got you. So yeah, but Nathan, at the end of the day, even though we may feel a little bit differently about his talent, where we're ranking him is the same, because also the way Nathan's doing his projections, he's probably got a similar target share to what I have projected for him. And I'm comfortable with that. Now, here's the thing. What if he does take a step forward? Like if he all of a sudden turned into, say just a 22% targets per route run guy. He was 21% at the end of last year when he took over. If he's out there for 90% of the routes, which is easily attainable, that'd be 136 targets. If at 95%, which is also easily attainable, if you look at this offense and the other receivers they have, that'd be 144 targets. And again, 22% targets per route run, it's good, but it's not like elite. Like, so that could still be in his range. And I think that's where people just get a bit twisted. They think everyone's trying to say, oh my God, Gabe Davis is the next X. There are probably some people saying that, but I don't think anyone on this podcast is saying that. We're just saying, look, like there could be problems from a talent standpoint. It's just going to be hard to miss in this particular offense, with the Bills.
I really just think it's as simple as, hey, this guy's looking at 100 plus targets from Josh Allen. Like what else do we need to even talk about at this point? But he is one of those receivers, Dwain, that we've talked about, ESPN, Yahoo. There really does seem to be a bigger discrepancy between Gabe Davis in the sharper drafts and in, your quote unquote home league room. So got a nice question from Kyle. Gabe Davis or Allen Robinson, Nathan?
I think I have Gabriel Davis just slightly higher.
Dwain?
Allen Robinson.
Wow. Well, I guess I got to be the tiebreaker here. Let me see who I got. I believe.
You gotta go look.
I got Gabriel Davis. Dude, it's a great question. They're right next to each other.
Yeah, I actually have Robinson higher by 1 spot.
Oh,
there you go. But they're close. They're close for me too.
Yeah,
they're close
exactly
for me too.
To each other.
I don't
like on one like that. If I'm like, look, if you guys are asking that question, they are really close. Like, take the one you like. Yeah. They're close enough. We probably all have them in the same tier too. So
nothing wrong with that. As I add Allen Robinson to my queue over here. All right, guys, talked a little bit. Gabe Davis, another 2 players where haven't exactly had the same sorts of conversations, but we've seen kind of their value dip and rise just based on kind of the new information we've gotten about them. Chris Goblin, Michael Gallup. At certain points of the offseason, it was like, we might not see these guys until November. Now, suddenly, I believe I saw a Tampa Bay beat reporter say there's a 55 to 45 chance of Goblin playing. I love that he didn't pull out the 50-50. We got 55-45 there in week one. Meanwhile, Jerry Jones saying if week one was a Super Bowl, Michael Gallup could be out there in his own right. So I've been drinking the Goblin Kool-Aid to a decent extent. Once we saw that he wasn't going to be on the PUP list, I moved him and Michael Thomas, into kind of the low end wide receiver 2 range. In terms of Michael Gallup, I mean, we got that early kind of training camp report where he just said it's not realistic he can be out there week one. But now it's sounding like with him not on the PUP list, maybe not week one, but it could be week 2, not like week 10, like it was necessarily sounding like. So, Nathan, how have you adjusted to the injury news with these two players throughout the offseason? And who do you find yourself? I mean, obviously, Goblin's going to be ranked higher. He should be because of the ADP. But are you more confident, I guess, at value taking on Chris Goblin or Michael Gallup right now?
Probably Chris Godwin, and I think that's mostly because of what I feel about the Buccaneers offense versus the Cowboys offense. Just looking at Godwin's stats these past 2 years, whenever Antonio Brown hasn't been playing, Godwin's basically been a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, which I know Tampa Bay's added some replacements to help offset the loss of Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski, but neither of the players that they've added were playing nearly as high of a level as the Brown and Gronkowski had been playing. So I could see Godwin, once he's healthy, being a very, very good wide receiver, where Gallup, I have troubles with the Cowboys offensive line and everything else going on with the offense. So, and Gallup just doesn't have nearly the same history as Godwin has. So I'm fine picking him if he's falling, but I'm not going out of my way to pick Gallup.
It is unique, Dwain, where we have this group of wide receivers. We can throw DeAndre Hopkins in there too, where these are guys where once they're healthy, once they're good to go, like we know for a fact they're going to be ranked rounds ahead of where we're taking them right now. We're not having to take, the same sorts of leaps of faith with guys, Isaiah McKenzie, the Rondeo Moores of the world. Overall, I guess, willingness to take Chris Goblin in that basically round 5, round 6 range where you're going to have to take him probably to feel confident about landing him.
Yeah, so I mean, with Godwin, we were actually doing that together in some of our drafts. We were taking him in round 5. I'm okay with it, but I feel like I've kind of gotten to the point now where I have plenty of exposure. So that's probably not a good answer for like everybody listening. So it's like I'll do it, but I don't feel the need to jam it. Like I've actually moved him down. I moved him down last week into wide receiver 3 territory, just because the more and more as we got closer and closer to season, even when you read Todd Bowles' quotes, like when you see somebody say something, a headline, so-and-so is going to play, not going to play. And then you go read the actual quotes from the coach or whoever, and you're like, this doesn't even like match up with like this headline. And all Todd Bowles has been saying is, well, he's going to be really hard to hold back when he's healthy. Like, well, no shit. Like we know that, but when's he going to be healthy, coach? Like, we don't know. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's all guesswork right now on the Bucs beat reporters. They're doing the best job they can, with the information that they have, but he has still not been in a practice even where he has been allowed to take contact. So that's worrisome to me. I think it's going to be a challenge for him to be on the field in week 1. I think additionally, it was just such a late season injury. The more I've thought about it, Ian, it's just like, how long before we get Chris Godwin to 100%? We may not see 100% Chris Godwin this year. Now, 90% Chris Godwin with Tom Brady is still probably, to Nathan's point, a better than 150% Michael Gallup, right? Because he's just a better player. So I'm not forcing it in round 5. I like him a lot better when I can get him in like round 6, whenever he slips back around to me there. There's just plenty of other guys that I still like in the 5th round.
Nate, you have more hardware to back up your rankings than Dwain and I combined, the rest of PFF crew and all that. I like to think that we know what we're talking about, but you do. Put your name, put your reputation out there. And obviously, again, as everyone can see in your lovely Twitter profile picture, you're just raking in those Fantasy Pros trophies year after year after year. With that said, I've had several not angry subscribers, but questioning subscribers look at your CD Lamb ranking and ask, what the hell is going on here? Nate, do you have a personal vendetta against CD Lamb? Why is he ranked so low, man?
I have him ranked better than he's ever done in fantasy football ever before.
Come on, man. We're playing in 2022.
So, like, the main arguments for him is Amari Cooper is gone, and he is a young, talented wide receiver, and we expect those kinds of players to improve over time. which I have him near the bottom of my top 10 wide receivers right now. I don't think he has quite as much talent as some of the other wide receivers I have ranked ahead of him. I think he definitely is capable of reaching that level, but I mentioned yesterday when we were talking about running backs, definitely a lot of trouble with the Cowboys offensive line. They lost 2 of their top 4 players. One of them is injured for most of the year. The other is still on the wrong side of 30 years old. So that's not great. A bunch of other players on the Cowboys offense only getting older as well. So I have those troubles. I can see Lamb's target share probably getting a little bit higher this year, but it was still already in the low 20% last year. And so I projecting him to see more targets than he's had, but he more often than not, like last year, wasn't having great fantasy performances. I think 9 out of his 16 games, under 60 or so yards, and no touchdowns in all of those games either. So we certainly hope that he's able to step up, but there's also going to be defenses that are going to be focusing more on him because Cooper's not there anymore. So who else are they going to focus on at wide receiver? So I think he'll definitely have a good season. I have him in the top 10. Other wide receivers that I like more than him that I think have higher chances of being a top 5 wide receiver this year.
It is funny how I'm like, how do you hate CeeDee Lamb so much, Nate? And, you have him as a top 10 wide receiver. It's just a matter of top 10 versus top 5. Dwain, I will say, have we not given enough to Nathan's point about the offensive line injuries and not having Cooper in there? We've moved Dak down for these reasons. Someone that we were more confident, I think, as a top 8, top 9 quarterback earlier in the offseason. Now, at least I have him, I believe, quarterback 11. He's become someone that, as we talked about in the quarterback episode, we're not necessarily going out of our way to get. Have we not given enough consideration to Dak's fall off impacting CeeDee Lamb? Or, Dwain, do you think there's just too much volume for a talented player to really bust?
Yeah, we moved Dak down, but more because he just didn't have multiple weapons, right? But it doesn't necessarily hurt Lamb. My thought is, like, if you want to take Davante Adams in front of him, like, you're obviously going to take Stefan Diggs in front of him, all the other guys that go above that. But I think once you get past Adams, like, he's in play because everybody at that point has questions, right? We've got Tyreek Hill moving to a new offense. He's got to share the load with Jalen Waddle. They could run the ball more. Deebo Samuel's playing with a quarterback that may not be able to complete a pass. They could be completely run heavy. You got to still deal with Brandon Ayuk. You got George Kittle. We get to AJ Brown. The Eagles were a run heavy team last year, right? They got Jalen Hurts, who people have questions about as quarterback. Now you've got, even more targets, where you got Dallas Goedert, you got Devontae Smith, who's a first round pick. So I think it's one of those deals where I agree with Nathan. I didn't put Lamb in the very top tier because, to his point, like, he has not completely smashed, from a standpoint of targets per route run. But there's also a very similar story here to what we just talked about with Gabriel Davis. So if you look at CeeDee Lamb, most wide receiver ones, if you look back like over the last 3 years, as far as, their route participation goes, they're typically out there, over 90%. They're like over 88% is the average for a wide receiver 1. If you look at CeeDee Lamb over his first 2 years, because Dallas rotated the receiver, they did to all the guys. None of these guys were at even 85%. He's been at 72% and 76% route participation. So that number this year is probably going to be over 90%. So on that alone, if he keeps his 22% targets per route run, even if Dallas takes a step back as an offense, they're still going to have to throw the ball as much as they're going to have to throw it. They're probably still going to run plenty of plays. That is going to be something that's just going to be, that alone is enough of a buffer for me to be like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and put him over Higgins. I'm going to go ahead and put him over Hill, Samuel, AJ Brown, all those guys, just based on being able to be out there more. Then if he does take the step forward, right, as a receiver, and his underlying data points, to Nathan's point, has not been as strong as, like, say, a Justin Jefferson's, like, out of this world, right? CeeDee Lamb's been really good, but not out of this world. But if you historically go and look back at the receivers that have had 2 top 24 finishes, have done some of the other things that CeeDee Lamb has done, especially if they've got first-round draft capital, most of them go on to have a smash season at some point. So I kind of put him there in that middle dividing line of, like, okay, the routes alone are going to make him at least equal to the guys I have below him. But if he does take the step forward, he's going to blow those other guys away. So I think everything Nathan said is right. I'm just kind of, the way I'm positioning in my ranks is just really calculating for the more routes.
I was doing this Bleacher Report stream a few weeks ago, and I was just going through my top 10 wide receivers, and I had CD one spot ahead of Davante Adams, and people were losing their damn minds over this. And it's like, guys, come on, it's a one spot ranking difference. Like, we're talking about two talented players here, but it is CD does. Maybe it's just a Cowboy thing, man. But I feel like not quite as volatile as Gabriel Davis this offseason, but everyone seems to have a strong opinion on CeeDee Lamb. Hopefully, his 2022 season looks a little bit more like the first half of 2021 as opposed to the second
I do
half.
get it. I do get it with Adams. I think that's the one name, if people wanted to have an issue with, of you having Lamb over, I think that's the one. I think once you talk about all the other guys that we mentioned, there's enough questions that it's like, okay, like it's going to get pretty close with all those other guys. With Adams, he's just done it for so freaking long. I know we now have Waller and we have Renfro, but I mean, he's still probably a lock for 25% target share, right? He's not going to get 30. Like, it ain't happening. So that's the one name, because Adams has proven it for so long, that I would say, okay, fine. If someone had a real issue with my ranks, fine. And to your point, it's one spot apart. Just take Davante Adams and leave me alone.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if you want to take Davante, okay, I see it. I'm not calling you crazy. I'd appreciate it if you don't call me crazy as well. We have our reasoning there. Nate, just last kind of hole, not hole in your rankings. Again, you know what you're doing here, but last thing that looking through your rankings that kind of popped off to me, you're pretty low on both Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. I also noticed with the PFF projections that, our lovely resident doctor, Eric Eager, isn't exactly the highest on the Broncos passing game in general. What are your overall expectations for Russell Wilson and company, Nathan? Because it could be a situation where, maybe we are just a little bit too obsessed with the new shiny thing out there. And so overall thoughts on, I guess, Russell Wilson and company in Denver.
Yeah, so I think in general, the team will have a good season. I think both what I'm doing and what our data scientists are doing is projecting out how many passes the team's going to have, how many targets the receivers will get. One thing I think in general I'm somewhat high on is the Broncos passing more to the running backs than they have in the years past. A lot of that has to do with the coaching staff, what the coaching staff has done in the past, what they have said. And I could see Williams in particular getting a lot more targets this year than he did last year, which the more targets there are to the running backs, the fewer the targets there will be to the wide receivers. I also know we were talking about KJ Hamler earlier. I think the gap between Hamler and the other wide receivers isn't quite as big as some others think. So I also think Hamler will have a decent season, even if no one else gets injured. So I'm also very happy to get him in the late rounds of my fantasy drafts. So I'm just trying to figure out where the targets are going to go. And I don't see Sutton or Jeudy having enough targets to warrant it unless they start playing better than they have been in the past, which Jeudy to this point really hasn't done much in the league so far.
It is concerning, Dwain, that we saw in the year 2020, Teddy Bridgewater produced 3 top 30 wide receivers in DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Curtis Samuel. Goes to Denver in a wide receiver room that we all really like. And I think a lot of people kind of compared it to Carolina in terms of having weapons all over the place to potentially just get more out of a quarterback than you're expecting. But our thought process was basically it's going to be Sutton or Jeudy to really benefit from Bridgewater. And Sutton just was getting shut out by the time Jeudy was back and he wasn't getting targets, but Jeudy didn't exactly do anything with it either. The answer ended up being either Tim Patrick or just more likely, no, like don't play any of these guys. Do you think there's a chance, Dwayne, that we're overrating kind of this Broncos offense? And I don't know, man, maybe Russell Wilson, maybe the guy we've seen the last 2 years is what we should expect more so moving forward, as opposed to the guy that we saw, more consistently 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a tough one, so like my thoughts are I don't see the Broncos throwing the ball more to running backs, because we know that quarterbacks can also be a major driver, right, of when the ball gets thrown to the backs. Unless they're going to do more design screen stuff. But even then, like, screens are never like 30% of your passing game, right? They're like 5% of your passing game. And so when we look at Russ, like, he doesn't really throw the backs. And he's actually had some good receiving backs in his backfield in the past. I think the other thing where, like, I actually disagree with where we have, their plays ranked is, again, we're talking about a division where you're going to have to play against Derek Carr, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes. Your out of division schedules then going to include Matthew Stafford. Then you're also going to have to play a good 49ers team. And then, you're going to have to turn around and play Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. So there's just going to be such an opportunity for shootouts. I think we're going to see more plays for the Broncos this year. I think you're going to see more passing plays than what we would typically expect from this particular coaching staff, which I do think would like to be pass balanced if we were picking a Madden playbook, right? Which in the league today, if we're counting every drop back as a pass play, it'd be like 60-40. But I think it could be a little bit more than that just because of the schedule that this team is going to have to play. And so where I do agree, with Nathan, I don't think either, Sutton, and I mentioned this a minute ago, but I don't think Sutton or Jeudy are slam dunks as far as talent profiles. The pass I will give Jeudy is he's just been hurt. Last year, we had the small sample where he was off to the great start, get the high ankle sprain. When you talk to athletes and you hear, what the high ankle sprain does, it can just derail your whole season. We think of it as, oh, I got an ankle sprain. The one we get in the driveway, like they're just, playing a game of pig with our kid, not really moving or anything, just trip on some gravel or something stupid. These are severe injuries. And then you're trying to come back and play at the very highest level. I'm still encouraged by Jeudy overall because he's still a first round talent. We've seen it on the tape, how well he can separate. He's had some drop issues, but typically drops are not sticky. So I like Jeudy the most of the two because his ADP is more reasonable, right? Sutton at this point, especially you're playing at the FFPC. Thanks Fantasy Mojo for your ADP data. Round 3, every freaking draft, Cortland Sutton's a round 3 pick. Ooh. I think that is projecting Cortland Sutton to be DK Metcalf, and I think that's a mistake. I think that is a mistake, people that are doing that with Cortland Sutton. Could it pay off? Yeah, because we've seen, even if the Broncos don't throw as much, the beauty of the downside is we've seen Russ really support, 2 receivers for how long in offenses that really didn't throw that didn't run that many plays in Seattle. So to me, the floor is still pretty good, but I will say Cortland Sutton is not DK Metcalf. Right. And I don't think you could even say Jerry Jeudy's Tyler Lockett, at this point. So that's kind of where I stand on him. Like Jeudy where he is at ADP. I like Cortland Sutton where he's at ADP on ESPN. He's going round 6. Oh. Round 6. Love Cortland Sutton at that range. Over in FFPC where people are just jamming him every time they can in round 3. I think that's a bit ambitious.
As you said before, a target from Josh Allen can be worth a little bit more from someone like Baker Mayfield or Geno Smith. If you want to go there, everyone, but leave Geno, we've left Brittany alone.
I tried to leave him alone and you just
leave Geno alone. Okay. I was the one that went back there now. I'm sorry, Geno. Okay. But it does make sense with Russ. Dwain, we're going to be in week 1 mode next week. Can you just give us the AFC West 50-point total stat, one more time for old time's sake?
56% of the games right now over on Superbook that are projected for 50 points or more. And this is only through week 17 because I was doing it for best ballers. So you guys have to go look at week 18. But 56% of the games, period, across the whole NFL belong to the AFC and NFC West. It is going to be shootout after shootout after shootout. It's just an incestuous, thing where they're just playing each other over and over. It's going to be fun, man. If you're playing in DFS, all it means is just save all your ammo for the late games. They're gonna be destroying every slate.
Every single 4:15 Eastern start just gonna have a game total of 55 and a half. I think you're right, Dwain, when you were saying that has to be some sort of record. Obviously, it's kind of hard to go back and see what every weekly over under was set up before the season started. If one of you out there has that sort of data, go ahead. But as I'm sure you'll continue to do this study, in future years, Dwain, I do think, even in 10 years from now, we could be looking back and just, oh my God, remember the AFC West in 2022, man, all those weekly shootouts going on. So fair points, Nathan. Now, Dwain, you're a little bit on the hot seat, but I got a layup for you here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the sun god himself. Your 39th player overall, wide receiver 19 off the board. We've said before, man, solve your life's problems by drafting Amon-Ra St. Brown. Let the people know why even sometimes in the right draft, round 4 is an acceptable range for the sun god himself.
Yeah, so the biggest question I had about Amon-Ra St. Brown heading into this preseason, and you and I talked about it, when we actually did that, hey, here's our biggest question for every team. It was, is he going to stay on the field when they leave 11 personnel, right? Because last year, I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, Hawkinson was gone and DeAndre Swift was gone. And those things are true. And that does, when you got less people to throw to, if you're talented, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, you can demand more targets. But the thing that worried me was, well, what if for some reason now, because they added DJ Chark, they drafted Jamison Williams, they brought back Josh Reynolds, what if they just see him as a slot receiver? And if you look at Detroit, they're a team that likes to be really multiple, like what the Saints used to do, which is where Dan Campbell comes from. That's his roots, right? And so they like to run, the 12 personnel. They like to come out, and do the knee biting ankle, the knee biting Ian. They like to come out, and you could be missing an ass cheek and only have 3 fingers, and they're still going to what does he say? Bury you, even though they're in the water. I don't know. I get lost when I listen to Dan Campbell, but I still like him. I can't help but get pumped up when I hear him talking and that vein sticking out of his neck. But with St. Brown, I was just worried, like, man, well, if he does get held to just slot work, like that could mean he's only out there for like 70% of the routes. And so what we saw this preseason, in the limited time we got to see Amon-Ra St. Brown out there, he was pretty much out there all the time. He did rotate a couple times in 12 personnel with Josh Reynolds. So, I mean, he's not going to be like a 95% guy, but I still think he's pretty safe to be over 85% target participation. And in the end of the day, that like is really all I needed to see because like if you just go back historically and you look at the PFF passing grades for rookies, there's a lot of data points for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But if you just want one in a nutshell, that's really it. Just go back and look at how these other receivers have gone on to perform. If they've had that 80.0 or better PFF receiving grade, you know, as rookies. So I'll just give you a quick list, Ian, and this one is 75 plus or more. So Odell Beckham Jr., Terry McLaurin, Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Doug Baldwin, okay? And this caught Doug Baldwin before he ever broke out. This caught Tyreek Hill before he ever broke out as a fantasy asset. Some of these, the easiest way to find future fantasy producers is just to go find guys that have already produced fantasy points. But then we look for other metrics. They're like, well, what are maybe some things that can tell us about someone that hasn't broken out yet? And that's what this metric's really good for, even though technically Amon-Ra already broke out. But if you look at Chris Godwin, caught him before his breakout in his rookie season. He had an 80.3 PFF receiving grade. Cooper Kupp, Stefan Diggs, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jarvis Landry, Hunter Renfrow. It caught Hunter Renfrow before everybody says Hunter Renfrow sucks, and he busts out for wide receiver one season. You might want to tap the brakes. Tyler Lockett and A.J. Green. That's pretty damn good company as far as I'm concerned. So the thing I look at with Amon-Ra, his ceiling, I think his ceiling is Jared Goff's year in 2019 with Cooper Kupp.
Yeah.
Like he's playing the Cooper Kupp role. He actually comps very closely to Cooper Kupp across all these data points. And people remember back then, people, oh man, Cooper Kupp plays a slot, not on the field enough, blah, blah, blah. Robert Woods going to take targets. Brandon Cook's going to take targets. What do? Wide receiver 4 finish overall. Jared Goff can't throw the football. What did Jared Goff do? I think he supported 3 top 36 fantasy performers that year at wide receiver. So I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. And just guys, you got to fade this noise about people talking about the Hawkinson and Swift stuff. Here's the thing. You know, many receivers have had a chance with everybody else on their roster injured to just come out and dominate with 30% target shares. There's a ton. And guess what? 99% of them can't do what Amon-Ra St. Brown did. You have to actually be good at the game of football because guess what? The guys on the other side, they actually want to win their game. And if you're all that they have, they're going to take you away, especially after a couple of weeks of this. And all of a sudden the other coach, you know, Ian, you watch film, you're usually watching 2 or 3 games of film, you know, on your opponent, the most 3 previous games. And all of a sudden you're like, who's this for? And you know, coaches are, who's 14? Yeah. We got to cover 14. Like, so it's just kind of, it's kind of silly to me, honestly, you know, what people have done, you know, with the Amon-Ra St. Brown argument. Like he's just a very talented player that should have been drafted sooner than he was. You know, he was a 4th round pick last year.
Some of the Urban Meyer slander, you know, is maybe getting a bit too much. Maybe it wasn't, but who's this 99 guy in the Rams? That's still just one of the funnier.
Doesn't know who Aaron Donald is. What are you doing in this league?
Just that was the one Urban thing that just absolutely slaved me this offseason. But great points all around. And yeah, we don't expect him to be the wide receiver 2 behind only Cooper Kupp like he was during the final 6 weeks of last season. But it's pretty cool that we know that he can have a 6-week stretch where he is the second most productive receiver in all of fantasy football. Not saying it's going to happen again, but my goodness, we don't have to draft him like that. Don't be afraid to take him far closer to his floor than his ceiling. Guys, one final thing. Dwain, is there any other hateful insult or something you want to get off your chest to Alan Lazard and his relatives before we get out of here?
No, I actually want to take this moment to tell them that I love them, and I actually hope that Alan Lazard succeeds.
Wow.
You know, all the joking aside, I know we have a fun time. It's just me looking at the numbers. Like, if Alan Lazard breaks out this year, folks, I do not care that he gets to play with Aaron Rodgers. He's already been playing with Aaron Rodgers. I do not care that Davante Adams is gone. Do you think that this team just decided not to throw to Alan Lazard just because they had Davante Adams? Like, there's the wide receiver 2 position's been open in Green Bay for how many years in a row, right? The same argument for MVS, and people have chilled on MVS. They're like, you know, he's around 10, 11 pick. That's where Alan Lazard should be going. Fine, you want to take him in round 9 because you think some of the rookies, you know, you're not as crazy about them. That's okay too. But like going round 6, like that's just, in my opinion, round 5 in some drafts, it's too much. Like I will say his visor looks kick ass. Like I saw him in that visor the other day, and I was waiting on a tweet from Ian, like calling me, to the table based on just the swag factor. But look, he's just over 4 years, he's never shown he's not hit any of the indicators we want as far as breakouts. He's not done it in fantasy points. He's not done it in yards per route run. He's not done it in targets per route run. He's not done it in PFF receiving grade. PFF receiving grade is designed to separate Allen Lazard from all the other factors. Like that's what it's designed to do. And he has not been able to even get better than a wide receiver 6 PFF receiving grade if you're equating receiver grades like to fantasy performances since 2011. So could it happen? Yes, it could happen. But I think it's an outlier. So I'm just not taking a swing.
Nathan, similar thoughts, or do you think Lazard's going to tell all of us nerds to go shove it this year and just ball the hell out because he's Aaron Rodgers' potential wide receiver 1?
Here I was hoping I'd get an apology from Dwain rather than he does well and then saying more bad things about him. But I do think the one argument that I would mention with Lazard is he has suffered a number of injuries throughout his career, so I think that has definitely hurt him at times. He's had, on very small sample sizes, some games where he's done well, and then shortly after those games has suffered an injury and then been out for a period of time. So I think that definitely contributes to it. Like, I don't think he's going to have an excellent season, but I think he'll see plenty of targets that he will have enough fantasy value based on where he's getting picked that, yeah, I don't think he'll be a top 10 wide receiver, but I think someone like him where he's going to see a lot of targets is good to pair with players where you're taking chances on a bunch of rookies, on a bunch of first-year players where maybe those players don't work out this year, and at least you have someone that should be seeing enough targets that you can stick in your starting lineup.
See, but that's the problem. You have to take him 3 rounds ahead of those. Like if he was going in the same range as those guys, I would be down to like mix him in. But I have one question for you, Nathan.
Yeah.
Are targets earned?
It depends on the situation.
Oh, it depends, Dwain.
It doesn't.
Got your ass.
It doesn't depend.
That's targets in Green Bay.
You can generate targets up to 15, 16%. Once you get past that, you actually have to be good. Like it's like, and that's kind of where Lazard is. Like, even if we go back to his targets per route run, which gets rid of all the time he missed, so we don't have to look at target shares, like he's never been able to do it. Like, so I get it, like with the injuries and stuff, but at the end of the day, like he missed games and then he should have been, healthier whenever he came back. So I don't know. Like, yeah, I'm a 1,000% believer in that targets are earned. I believe there's a threshold that you can design and you can get to a player. But once the other team decides that, okay, you're the number 1, and now we're going to treat you like it, like you have to be really good to make that work. And I like Aaron Rodgers can't fix that on his own.
Nathan, resident Packers fan here. We have the one thing that Dwain brought up that I do struggle to get past, as much as I would love Dwain as much as I love always telling Dwain just to shove it.
Oh, if I'm wrong this year, guys, my life's over and like I have to leave the industry, just so you know. So
that's what's on the line here. But they're we've seen Rodgers with Jordy and Cobb and Greg Jennings and Jordy. Like, it's not like that Rodgers has gone his entire career without having 2 high-end wide receivers at the same time in fantasy. We did not see that with Lazard. We did not see that with MVS. Maybe their new situations work out, but it does, certainly working against them. As awesome as that comp group that Dwain read a couple minutes ago about Amon-Ra St. Brown is, if you try to take the similar comp group for Lazard or MVS, you're not going to really get too many hits there.
You don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear it. It's not good.
Fellas, we have
Rashard Matthews. They're saying there's a chance. Rashard Matthews is the one. He's the one guy that I found that basically comped to Lazard that had that late breakout. Who was the court? That was with Mariota too. So you definitely could argue that Aaron Rodgers is way better than Mariota. So I'll give you that.
This is actually just a Drake London discussion now. But okay, Nathan, one bold call for the wide receiver position in 2022 before we get out of here.
One bold call. Let's see. DJ Moore will be a top 5 wide receiver.
Ooh, you want to say anything else, or you just
Sure. I'll add that he's been incredibly consistent with his yards and not having enough touchdowns, but I think having Baker Mayfield will be a huge help. Moore, one of his best assets, is he's a deep threat wide receiver with Sam Darnold, who could not throw the ball deep. So he has not been able to take advantage of that, where Baker Mayfield has been fairly accurate on his deep passes, one of the top 3 most accurate over the past couple years. So I think having Mayfield will lead to a lot more big plays out of Moore, and therefore a lot more fantasy points.
Sadly, the best quarterback that DJ Moore will play with is Baker Mayfield. That's not Cam Newton slander, late career, injured shoulder Cam Newton. I'm not counting him. So sadly, Baker's the best for DJ, and Carson Wentz is going to be the best wide receiver, best quarterback that Terry McLaurin has ever caught passes from as well at the professional level. Dwain, one wide receiver bull call take for 2022.
I mean, I'll just stick with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He finishes as a top 12 wide receiver in PPR.
Ooh. All right. I think you've already said enough about the sun god himself. I will say that Rondeo Moore finishes as a top 24 wide receiver in full PPR, 105 to 110 targets with, a nice little touchdown spike. And we actually see him emerge as the Curtis Samuel, Robert Woods type of wide receiver that we look up at the end of the year and go, oh shit, he got 25 rush attempts throughout this bitch as well. So Rondeo Moore, someone that, we got the undisclosed injury. So it is one of those things where we don't exactly know how healthy he's going to be in week one. Kind of wish, I don't know, that was brought to our attention a little bit before yesterday, seemingly, but maybe it was, and I just wasn't doing quite as much due diligence as I should have been. Either way, Rondale Moore, Isaiah McKenzie, despite these late, off-season nicks and bruises, obviously not ideal. I'm not going to completely leave out the potential for a wide receiver 3 to even wide receiver 2 to emerge behind the obvious number 1 in both the Arizona Cardinals and Buffalo Bills offense. We love Josh Allen. We love Kyler Murray. Don't be afraid to love some of those receivers that they will also be throwing the ball a lot to, other than just Hopkins, Hollywood, and Stefan Diggs. Fellas, it's going to wrap everything up. Hope you guys enjoyed the sleeper mock drafts that we had going on here on YouTube as we were discussing all things wide receiver. Nathan, anything else you want to get off your chest and let the people know what you got over at pff.com this week?
I have probably 5+ articles going up each day with everything that you would want to know to get you ready for your fantasy drafts this week and all the rankings and sleepers and strategy that you need.
Just to reference, like Nathan actually is not kidding. We have like our consumer team chat basically that we all enter our articles in at the beginning of every week. And I think Nate's entry was the first time I've ever had to actually scroll down like to actually get the entire thing on a page. So super flex rankings, top 300 standard rankings, half PPR. Nathan's my guys, wide receiver ranks and tiers, running back ranks and tiers. I mean, that's just in the last 18 hours and I skipped a few of them. So truly all the top PFF fantasy content you can find. Go check out Nathan Jahnke over at pff.com. Dwain, final words. What do you got at pff.com?
We got my guys, we got fades, we got all the updates. We've been covering the strategy stuff. So similar. Now I'm not doing 5 a day. So, I don't bleed green like Nathan. I got to figure out what he's doing. But I need some of that, Nathan. Just send me some. But I just want to end the podcast with saying, look, if Alan Lazard finishes as a top 24 receiver, I'll come on this podcast next year with Nathan, and I will wear a cheese head for the entire podcast because it's what I deserve. If that happens,
that'll be even better than the.
I'm not even asking for anything back from Nathan. I'm just offering this up. So.
That'll be better than the famous cowboy hat episode that I believe Nathan was on here as well with. Fantastic stuff. If I had to guess Nathan's article output, I think in the, he's got the doors behind him right now. There's actually 12 interns just absolutely busting their ass that PFF doesn't know about. They're not being paid. Nathan, throws them a couple scraps of meat every night before he locks them back in the basement. I don't know. Either way, pff.com. Check out everything from Nate, Dwain, myself, and with the new Pro Football Focus app, we finally have our cool ass quad force in there. Efficiency, workload, the offensive environment, strength of schedule. We always talk about these 4 things in some way, shape, or form when evaluating players. And we make, sacrifices. Okay, other than the top 10, 12 players, not everyone's going to check all these boxes. So what do? We take on someone like A.J. Brown that has completely awesome talent. Maybe we're a little bit worried about the volume. But again, with our new quad force, we basically just have a cool it's a quad force thing. It's like a graph that you can click on and see the underlying premium stats and also just, I think, have a chance to see the whole picture for yourself. And then once you have the whole picture in mind, then you can go ahead and make your analysis, our ranks and analysis there as well. So basically with the PFF app, you go to a player, you can see what me, Nathan, Dwain, and Kevin Cole think about them. And if you say, what the hell do these guys know? I'm the freaking gangster here. I know who the best fantasy players are. Great. Scroll down and you can get all of the metrics that anyone's going to want to look at to try to make an educated fantasy decision. Your one-stop shop for all things fantasy football. Go get the Pro Football Focus app now available in the Apple Store. For Nathan, for Dwain, I'm Ian. Thanks so much for tuning in to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.